John Mateer, Brent Venables, and the Oklahoma Sooners enter the 2026 college football season with aspirations of an SEC title, but not just that. Brent Venables has his team ready for a deep college football playoff run that I no doubt believe could end in a national champion trophy. This individual, John Mateer, he's capable of putting the cape on. We saw it throughout last season. He came over with his offensive coordinator from Washington State and Ben Arbuckle, and he looked dominant the early stages of 2025. He was the Heisman Trophy frontrunner until the injury to his throwing hands, and he was really not the same guy. Now, he looked better in the playoff game against Alabama. The Sooners jumped out to a quick lead in that game. But entering this season, you just look at some of the photos of him that have been circulating social media. You look at some of the cleaned up throwing motion. There is a belief in this man that this guy can lead this team to a place where Oklahoma has not been for quite some time. And I believe that the additions of Trell Harris from Virginia, over 800 receiving yards last year, he was spectacular for the Cavaliers. And then Parker Livingston from Texas, one of Arch Manning's favorite targets a year ago. And that, of course, combined with the dominant wideout from last year, Isaiah Satania, that some scouts believe could wind up being a first-round draft pick. He has another season like last year, and he follows it up with incredible explosiveness after the catch. This is one of the most dangerous players in all the land when the ball is in his hands. So let's get to it. Let's go through this schedule that they have. It is a 9-game now SEC schedule. It's a gauntlet. Last year was a gauntlet. Once they had dropped a couple of games, nobody believed that they could make it to the playoff, and yet they stood hosting a playoff game at the end of the season. So they start off the year with a couple of out-of-conference games. They've got UTEP, Michigan, and New Mexico. UTEP is on a Friday night. I know I will be locked into that one, specifically looking at what the run offense looks like, what the run game has in store with Torrey Blaylock and Xavier Robinson, who, man, we thought that these guys would be incredible last year, and they just could not be unleashed. The offensive line was embattled throughout the season. Protection was very difficult, and they just could not get any momentum. Now, when you have a defense like Oklahoma does, and coming off of a year last year where they were insane getting to the quarterback, and they were at the top or near the top in just about every category, you don't need to be a high-scoring, a very prolific offense to win a bunch of games. But when you do face those opponents, those really tough games, when you play Texas again in Red River, when you face the Georgia Bulldogs in September, when you even play a team like Ole Miss, A&M, South Carolina that's capable of putting up points on offense, this schedule has games on it where the Sooners will not win if they are incapable of scoring 3 touchdowns in a game. That's what it's simply going to take. No matter how good their defense is, there's teams on this schedule that just have simply too much talent on the offensive side of the ball. So UTEP, that should be a handed win for them. I would love to see Mateer get momentum and push the ball downfield and the run game get going. We know the defense very likely only gives up a score. I could see a final score of something like 34-6, 34-3, where UTEP has one good drive and it culminates in points. But you do need a good performance because the following week you've got a quality Big Ten team. Now, Michigan has flown under the radar this offseason in the football sense. Everything has been about the controversy, the program, the allegations, everything around Sharon Moore. And then Kyle Whittingham steps in. And this is the type of individual that doesn't draw headlines, doesn't bring attention to himself. He's purely football. Oklahoma fans have an immense amount of respect for a guy like Kyle Whittingham. And I know that Oklahoma fans are some of the most knowledgeable in the entire country. And Kyle Whittingham is a top 10 coach in this sport. And he will have Michigan ready to play in this game. It is on the road. It's in Ann Arbor. It's not at home this time around. And Bryce Underwood very likely will play better than he did last year. It was atrocious. I mean, they had one big run. I want to say it was the first play of the second half. Justice Haynes breaks off a 75-yard rushing touchdown, made it somewhat of a game, but Oklahoma and John Mateer simply outplayed them. Now, they've got Andrew Marsh on the outside. He had a big year last year. Jordan Marshall is back. They brought over the transfer from Utah with Whittingham and John Henry Daly, a really good edge defender. But Oklahoma has a chess piece that very few teams that are, if you're not Oregon, up front with those defensive tackles, or that really might be the only team that's quality and capable of producing a push up front like the Sooners this year, with David Stone leading the way. In my opinion, this is, if not the best, one of the 2-3 best defensive tackles in college football. He had 42 total tackles last year, an immense number from a D tackle, 8 tackles for loss. You don't need a bunch of sacks. That's what people often look at that position. How many sacks did he have? He had less than 5 sacks. He's not a great. That's not the position. The position is to stuff the run. It is to generate a push up front so that a team can't just run the ball down your throats. You can get teams to 3rd and 6, and then guys like Taylor Wine, last year it was R. Mason Thomas, pin their ears back and go get to the quarterback on 3rd and long, having it in an obvious passing situation. Brent Venables would say that in a more condensed way than I would, no doubt. But this guy is simply why I believe Oklahoma walks out there and they're able to beat Michigan by 2 scores, even if it is on the road. Michigan's got talent. Jair Hill. They've got Rod Moore. But Oklahoma will very likely win this game by a fashion. I'll call it like 24-13, 23-13, something in that manner, because Bryce Underwood was not decisive last year. He didn't even get to the part of the quarterback position where you start anticipating windows and throwing the ball right before your wide receivers coming out of a break. He didn't even get there because he could not hit the easy ones. I believe he'll get better at the easy ones, and then probably for him, the progression is in year 3. That's where he starts to anticipate throws. Whereas you look at the other side, John Mateer, he will throw any pass, anywhere, at any time, no matter the coverage. He is the definition of a Doc Holliday straight-up gunslinger. So I'm going to take Oklahoma to win that one before New Mexico. That'll be a game you obviously cannot look past. It is a trap game because you've got the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens on the road the following week. But New Mexico, Oklahoma walks out their offensive line and they'll be able to get a win. So a 3-0 start in out-of-conference play before you are staring down the barrel of Georgia and Texas. Gunnar Stockton and the Bulldogs. This is as tough as it gets. Now, the time for this game is undetermined as of now. Very likely we're looking at a primetime game. You're looking at 2 blue bloods of the sport and a Georgia Bulldogs team that will be weaker on the perimeter this year. There's no Zachariah Branch this season. They do have Lawson Lucky stepping into a larger role at tight end after Oscar Delp was selected by the New Orleans Saints in this past year's draft. But they will not be as prolific with their weapons, specifically outside the numbers or towards the perimeter of the field. But Nate Frazier in the backfield, coupled with the run game from Gunnar Stockton, this is very dangerous. And that is a way that you will beat Oklahoma, as if you're able to possess the football, run it, and you can turn drives into 3. If you're able to score, it doesn't obviously turn into the amount of success you'd want if you're not turning those into touchdowns. But Georgia last year did have an explosive offense that pushed it downfield. They just did not play great defense. I believe this Georgia Bulldogs defense will be better this season. They've still got Raylan Wilson, Chris Cole at linebacker, maybe the best duo in the country. And then in the back end, you've got KJ Bolden and Ellis Robinson. They're going to give Oklahoma a really tough struggle. But call me crazy, I see the Sooners going into Athens and going into Georgia and getting a win there. I would say that John Mateer and Gunnar Stockton, in the sense of NFL quarterback prospects, John Mateer is a little bit higher because of his size and the traits that he possesses. Gunnar Stockton is such a tough kid. And like I say, Oklahoma fans really respect that grit that he has. I'm going to take the Sooners to win this game. Call me crazy for having this amount of confidence. This Oklahoma defense and their ability to get to the quarterback and stop the run, they're simply beat to built Georgia. Now, they lose this game and John Matier throws 2 interceptions. If on a 3rd and 9 at the 21-yard line on Georgia's side of the field, he throws into the end zone to double coverage, instead of you've got 3 points in your back pocket, right? If you're on your own 26 and it's 3rd and 11 and you try and force the football, instead of, all right, let's punt the ball and play defense. We got a great defense. That's how you lose games. And they were put in tough positions last year, this great defense that was able to back themselves out of holes. I mean, it looked like the game against Tennessee, the Volunteers are going to run away, and R. Mason Thomas makes a heck of a play. Did wind up getting hurt on that one. But leaning on your stars, right? Peyton Bowen, Eli Bowen in the back end, Kip Lewis and Heineke right through the middle. So a 4-0 start. They beat Georgia. The bye week comes at a great time. And then it's Texas. Texas Longhorns. This is, if not the best rivalry in all of sports, it is right there at the top. Red River. And they have, I'll say it, they have more talent than Oklahoma does this year. And I'm not just talking about bringing in the transfer wide receiver who I call the freak Cam Coleman, right? They've got Raleek Brown that they brought out of Arizona State. This kid is an absolute burner at running back. Hollywood Smothers. And defensively, Colin Simmons, he is a problem. And I believe he'll be a massive problem in this game. Obviously, they're barring any injuries. He is the type of guy that can take over a game. Matier clearly struggled and probably shouldn't have been on the field, but nobody's going to critique the guy for battling, wearing his heart on his sleeve. I'm going to take Texas to win this game because the weapons that they have on the perimeter are simply better than a year ago. Wingo's back. Livingston's obviously on Oklahoma now, so that'll be fun. A chance to get back at his former team. But Texas's offensive line-wise, they'll be more sound. They're going to run the football a lot better. They're not going to have as many drop passes, and Arch Manning's going to play in rhythm. And with the very poor performance from a year ago in the first month, he's going to have that experience to sort of springboard him in a way, having gone through that adversity to play better. So I'm going to take Texas to win this game, and maybe it's close at the end, 8-9 points, and Oklahoma's knocking on the door, but I will take the Longhorns. Guys, I'm going to be previewing, predicting, breaking down all these matchups, right? We're going to be talking about the biggest games this season right here on this channel. So this is Blitz with Blender, and thank you so much for watching. We're going to get into the rest of the schedule, but I'll have you know, we go into 25, 30-minute breakdowns for these games when they do come up. Right now is just a preview for it, but this Oklahoma offensive line, against Georgia, they'll be tested. Against Michigan, they'll be tested. But against Texas, this is it. With Hiro Kanu at defensive tackle, they're going to go up against one of the best in the country every day in practice throughout fall camp, which helps. But facing that Texas line, Eddie Pierre-Louis at left guard, you really, and Marion Harris at right tackle, the transfer, you really have to play as good as it gets. And I'll take Texas as right now to win that game. I've got a win against Kentucky the following week in Will Stein's first year there. The next week, you've got Mississippi State, the Bulldogs, on the road. So a couple of opportunities to get back in the win column. Now, it's possible that Oklahoma has 2 losses at this part of the year. You really can't lose to Georgia and Texas. Neither of those games are at home. You cannot drop both. That would be way too tough going down the stretch, putting pressure on even those lower tier teams like Kentucky, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Florida. It's definitely not of the quality of Georgia, Texas, but it's still going to be SEC games. So we know how tough it is week in, week out going up against NFL competition. But I've got a win against Kentucky. I've got a win against Mississippi State. And then it's South Carolina. And Dylan Stewart, probably at the 6th overall, 7th overall pick in the 2027 NFL Draft. Him and Colin Simmons are right there neck and neck. Flip a coin. One of those guys will win SEC Defensive Player of the Year. But Lenore Sellers, we believe, will be better protected. This is a very tough matchup on Halloween. I'm excited for that one already. Nick Harbor, everyone's talked about it. He did have, bigger numbers this past season. But I'm going to take Oklahoma to win that one. Whatever South Carolina did on their offensive line, I don't believe it'll be enough to be able to stack up against the Sooners' D-line, and then it's Florida on the road in the Swamp. This clearly poses its challenges, but if you've got one loss, you are feeling great about your chances because 10-2 gets you into the playoff. 3 losses is where it's shaky. An added SEC game this season. The only team really for me that would make the playoff out of the SEC with 3 losses is probably Texas if one of those losses was to the Buckeyes again and the added game in the SEC. But I'm going to take them after beating South Carolina to also beat Florida to essentially set up Ole Miss and A&M. If you have 2 losses, clearly you got to win those last 3. That's why if you've got 2 losses against Texas and Georgia, I hate to say it, but that could be your season. You're talking about your season being on the line in the first month of the year, Georgia, and then the second week of October against Texas. You got to win one of those games. And if you're a national title contending team, you should beat one of those teams. So Ole Miss at home. You've got Trinidad Chambliss in company. You don't have a Dejon Stribling. Will Eccles stayed there, didn't leave for LSU with Kiffin. Suntarian Perkins stayed, although they lost their leading tackler in TJ Daugherty, and they lost Princewell Umamielen, one of my favorite edge defenders in the country. I'm going to give Oklahoma a loss against Ole Miss. I know it's at home, but this quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss, is a problem. Now, I'm gonna have Oklahoma beating A&M and winning at Missouri to have a stressful end to the season where it's on the line, and they beat A&M at home and they beat Missouri to advance to the college football playoff with a 10-2 record. But Ole Miss and the challenges that Trinidad Chambliss will present this year, they're likely playing for their lives. They might have 2 losses at this stage, and that would be fascinating. If you've got, let's say, a 7-2 Oklahoma versus a 7-2 Ole Miss, both teams playing for their playoff lives. It's on the brink. The loser, essentially, season is over. I mean, a lot of Oklahoma fans probably wouldn't sign up for that because they would rather go into that game with 1 loss. But if I offered you right now a 7-2 record going into that Ole Miss game, would you take it? Because you're guaranteed meaningful football in the middle of November. And it hasn't always been the case for Oklahoma the past decade or so. But after a loss to Ole Miss, like I talked about, just corralling him will be tough. And Eccles specifically and Perkins, this is going to be very difficult to run the football through the middle, and Mateer will be running for his life at times. But A&M, I'm just scared more simply by Trinidad Chambliss and the tools that he showed in huge games last year playing well, whereas Marcel Reed in the biggest of games has disappeared. Well, they beat LSU last year, but against Texas, in the playoff game against Miami, he just did not show up in the biggest of moments. And in a big one here, another team in A&M, they could have 2 losses without a doubt at this part of the season, and they're looking ahead probably at Texas, the final game of the year at home in College Station. So they're thinking about their last game. In Oklahoma, we beat them. All right, now it's Texas. But that's how exactly you get beat. You do not overlook Brent Venables in Oklahoma. That's how you get punched in the mouth and you drop down by 14 points in the first 20 minutes. At Missouri, with Austin Simmons, you simply, against Eli Drinkowitz's squad, you got to stop the run with Hardy, and it's smooth sailing from there. So I'm going to go with a 10-2 record for the Sooners and a playoff push once again. 10-2 very likely does not get you a bye. You got to play in the SEC title game or win the SEC. The same goes for the Big Ten or the ACC if you want to have a bye. You got to win one of those conferences. The only team that could get to get a bye in the playoff would be Notre Dame. That does not play in a conference title game, and they go 12-0, they're going to get a bye. So let me know down below in the comments what you think about the record prediction for them and what your thoughts are about this team next season. And look, it's coming around the corner. It's right here. We're just a couple of weeks away. So if you enjoy football content year-round, college football, the NFL, your Sooners, we're going to have a bunch of content here on them. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to tune in. And if you have not subscribed, please make sure to do so. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching Blitz with Blender.
Best player in college football.
That Georgia and Ohio State game, New Year's Eve, is going to be a classic.
Josh Blender. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Blender.
To the 40, 35, 30, Espinoza to the 20.